Hi, thanks for the welcome, everyone. Yeah, um, today I want to tell you a story um, of a company. Maybe some of you have seen that company in one way or another. Maybe you worked in those companies. Maybe you're consulting these companies. I'm going to call that company today the Big Puck Bank. Yeah, so that's a big bank, a very conservative house in the financial industry. And as you can guess, yeah, how software is being developed in many banks. Banks have a lot of IT history. Banks have been doing IT for a very long time with very established processes, for instance, under a scrutiny of regulations and stuff like that. But a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about in that story today is not specific to banks. Yeah, it can be to other product organizations. I've seen some things I'm talking about in insurance companies, in the automotive industry, and so on. But our example now is the Big Puck Bank. Now, in the bank, we have a team of software engineers and software developers. Yeah, they do all the heavy lifting. Yeah, they implement the software, and very often they get requirements from the business. Yeah, so there are business analysts, requirements engineers, business people that tell these engineers, okay, you need to build the software with the following features, the following set of rules. And for instance, at an insurance company I've been working at, I actually saw a process where the business folks were creating UML diagrams, yeah, as specifications for the developers. That was passed to the developers, and they had to code down those UML diagrams, for instance. But also, yeah, this team had to implement software based on architectural decisions from the architecture team. Yeah, sometimes we call those kinds of architecture teams ivory tower architects. The non-so-nice arguments may be PowerPoint architects or whatever. I try to stay very, very nice because I've seen very, very good centralized architecture teams with insane amount of knowledge about architectural work. Yeah, but what they do is they tell other teams basically what to do, and they also own those decisions. They are responsible for the guidelines, for the decisions, and all this stuff. Yeah. The development team in the Big Puck Bank also works based on timelines that are very often imposed by the management. So the new mortgage loan system needs to be live in 6 months. That's the deadline. Yeah. And by the way, we are also are ready for a marketing campaign. We bought TV spots, whatever for that. That's the deadline. Yeah. And they work with, let's say, a monolithic on monolithic applications with an aged tech stack. Now, let me be very clear. I love monoliths. Monoliths are great. Yeah? And this shouldn't be a talk about why microservices are the best thing. It depends on requirements, circumstances, and so on. But in our example, in our story, they work like that. Yeah? These teams, and I've seen that in many organizations, aren't empowered at all. Yeah, they are like at the receiving end of a plethora of requirements, yeah, and they are among the most downstream teams in the organization. Yeah, they are sometimes also a little bit helpless. Then let's take a look at another team, the architecture team. Yeah, so we have a bunch of architects that work in a team, and let's take a look at the role of a software architect. What is a software architect supposed to do? I think software architects should understand certain requirements. They should design structures. Yeah, identify cases for cross-cutting concerns. I always say communication is one of the most important tasks of an architect, yeah, to communicate with various stakeholders. I'm a huge fan of the Software Architect Elevator book by Gregor Hoppe, yeah, that heavily stresses that as an architect, you need to be able to communicate with various stakeholders, with diverse sets of interests and so on. Yeah, we need to support the implementation, and the architecture needs to be evaluated as well. So those are the usual architectural tasks that are in this team. Yeah, so they define structures, say, okay, those are certain architectural requirements, and you need to be following those rules, and so on. Now, for that work, and that was already mentioned yesterday in Eduardo's talk, there are, for this architecture work, there are various ways of working. So one way of working is a very centralized part called division of work. So we have an architect that tells others what to do. Or in our case at the Big Puck Bank, we have the architecture team that tells the other teams what rules to apply, what the architecture guidelines are, and so on. Another way of doing is that no one is responsible. So you could also call that emergent, democratic, implicit architecture. There are various terms where we say, okay, there are no explicit architecture decisions being done. Architecture just emerges out of nothing. Another way would be architecture agents, so that we explicitly bring architecture into the teams that are writing the software, and that we have various people who are responsible for different parts of the architectural work. So for instance, when I was working as a developer, I had a very strong background in the area of Java persistence, so maybe I was suitable for architectural decisions around persistence, transaction handling, those things. Don't ever have the idea and ask me for architectural decisions in the field of security. That would be an utterly bad idea, because I'm not competent in this area at all, for instance. And the other option is that we embed architecture into the teams. So that we have two roles in a team. On the one hand, the developers, on the other hand, the architects. Now, at our Big Puck Bank, we had this very centralized part where we have an explicit team that tells the development teams basically what to do, and that has the power to enforce those rules upon others. So the architecture team at the Big Puck Bank sees itself like that. So they think they are the heroes of digitalization, of software engineering, of software architecture, and that they have a certain superpower, and that they have a very prominent hierarchical position in the bank. To a certain degree, that's true. Let me introduce you to the boss of the bank. She realized that the current way of working, she says, okay, our time to market is not on a satisfactory level. We're a little bit too slow. We're losing customers, we're losing deals. We need to shift our IT strategy, our delivery strategy to something else, because there are various bottlenecks. Of course, with centralized architecture, you create a bottleneck. If they don't make decisions, the downstream teams are in a certain set of uncertainty. They feel blocked, and they defer work, probably. So the shift in strategy that comes from the boss is, okay, we want to shift from economies of scale towards economies of speed. What do I mean with economies of scale? I think in many, I would say, organizations that have a very long IT delivery history, we've seen for a very long time an optimization for the first. That means IT has been seen as a cost center, very often placed under a CFO, for instance, and we tried to reuse things as much as possible. So let's build one thing and reuse it, reuse it, reuse it. That leads to a lot of collaboration between the teams. So those teams need to coordinate their efforts, their testing, their releasing, maybe also on data structures, API contracts, whatever. And economies of speed goes for a different thing, that we say, okay, we want to be able to speed up our flow of delivery. The Team Topologies folks, for instance, talk about fast flow in that area. So we want to enable teams to deliver value to the customer in a fast fashion. And what we very often hear is now at the big puck bank, the boss says, okay, dear development teams, you are now agile cross-functional teams and you take a full end-to-end responsibility from now on. Yeah, so let's do that. That sounds great, doesn't it? Yeah? So let's go for that. Yeah, there's a bunch of buzzwords in there. That sounds good. Everyone is talking about that. Let's get started. Well, I'm not so sure about that. And this reaction is totally natural. Yeah? And at the big puck band, suddenly an outside voice comes in. Yeah? A guy, yeah, who said to the management, well, they have a valid point here. Yeah? But why? They should be excited. Yeah? They get responsibility. Isn't responsibility a good thing? And they get more power. They get more influence on the things. What's wrong? Tell me more. In those transitional phases, we see that teams are being overwhelmed in terms of cognitive load. Yeah? Because you can't just tell someone, you take responsibility from now on. Yeah? That needs to grow. People need to feel empowered to take on that responsibility. That doesn't happen overnight. Yeah? So also, when you're used as a team to work for the last 5 years under certain decisions, like architectural decisions, like business modeling decisions, and so on, and you don't have to take any responsibility for those, because a decision done by a centralized teams, and if you follow that, that's not your problem. So to be blunt, you don't get fired for that when you say, hey, I just followed the rules. Yeah? And suddenly, this disappears. Yeah? And this adds a lot of stress on those teams. Yeah? And this is a major driver for the cognitive load as well. Yeah? And also, don't we want motivated teams in that area? Yeah? Of course we want that. Every management, every leadership team wants that. That's what I assume. Yeah? Very often, I don't see that in those transitional phases. Yeah? We see a lot of blockers. There's a great book that gets quoted quite a bit by Daniel H. Pink, who said that knowledge workers are very much, and that's what we do basically, yeah? We're knowledge workers to a certain degree, are motivated by autonomy, mastery, and purpose, so that we can make autonomous decisions. Yeah? That we can decide certain things on our own. Isn't it motivating if we master certain things? If we are really, really good at a certain thing, at doing a certain thing. For instance, I love to produce my own filled pasta. And I'm currently heavily nerding into pizza doughs. And especially a pizza Neapolitana, the one with the very thin crust on the bottom and the high rounding, is a challenge. When I master a perfect pizza Neapolitana at home, I feel super motivated, and the next day I set up the next dough just to run into the next failure of a totally burnt pizza or something like that. Yeah, but mastering certain things is super motivating. And when people have the impression that they are able to master things, yeah, that they have them under control, that's super motivating. Also, if you follow a clear purpose, when you say, okay, the stuff that we do is important. We understand the importance of things. We understand why we are here. We understand clearly also what the boundaries of our purpose are. Yeah? That's very, very important. Now, if you just toss a team into ice cold water and say, hey, you're responsible now, you will lose all that. Also, with very, very big structures. I once worked with a team that was responsible for a really ugly big ball of mud at an insurance company. I asked them, hey, what's the purpose of your team? Why are you here? And the answer was keeping that beast alive in production. The motivation was not so good. Are you able to master the domain complexity in there? Laughter. Michael, typical consultant question. Go away. And I think, yeah, what we need to achieve is an environment in which teams can reach autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I explicitly chose the word reach because this is a path that takes time. This doesn't happen overnight. And I think a key role for the boss in that area is, I always say they should act, a leadership team in such a transition should work like a gardener. Yeah? That they should say, okay, there is a certain soil and there are certain plants. Those are the people and the teams. And we need to prepare the soil so that the teams and the persons working in that team are able to flourish, to grow. Yeah? And I think that's I think a mental model that I very much like about those transitions. Yeah. Now, currently at the Big Puck Bank, we are here, but where we want to go is there. So you can't just say, let's do that now, and we take the responsibility for it. That doesn't work. And now, the other thing is take fears seriously. So when you say to the development teams, you're now responsibility, your job is to do a lot of architecture as well. You create a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the architecture teams. And you still need them to work. So do we get fired? What about us? Aren't we important anymore? And being important, having power, is a thing that you shouldn't underestimate in especially organizations that have a very hierarchical nature. Yeah? And that's something that you have to address. Yeah? But there is an idea, yeah, for those folks, and an idea that I have applied now, I think it was 3 times to 4 times with customers of mine. Yeah? And that idea stems a bit from the Team Topologies book. Who doesn't know Team Topologies here? Okay, a few folks. Okay, Team Topologies has been introduced by Matthew Skelton and Manuel Pais. And this is an organizational idea, yeah, for IT delivery organization. And this is aimed at creating an environment where teams can reach fast flow. We don't have the time to dig extremely deep into that, but I want to give you a glimpse. So Team Topologies, for instance, introduces 4 fundamental types of teams, or also topologies. And they say that a team should feel attracted by one of those types, like from a magnet. So we should rather move into the direction of one team type or another team type. Yeah? So I like the magnet metaphor here a bit. Now, the first type are the streamlined teams, and the goal of them, yeah, so basically those agile, cross-functional teams that deliver value to the customer in a fast pace, they're very often seen as streamlined teams. Yeah? And all other team types, team topologies, are aimed at making those folks fast. Yeah? So your former development teams should, over time, transform into those streamlined teams. On the other hand, we have complicated subsystem team, which is like, I always say, I'm happy when I don't need them. Yeah, but there are certain cases where they are needed in order to reduce the cognitive load of the streamlined teams by maintaining a part of the system that heavily relies on expert knowledge that is hard to get on the market. Yeah, where you really want to centralize a certain type of knowledge. Personal opinion, and with a blinking eye set, I sometimes say complicated subsystem team can be recruiting driven. Yeah, when we have a hard time recruiting a certain knowledge, when that knowledge is very, very special, it makes sense to bundle them into a complicated subsystem team. Platform teams also aim at reducing cognitive load of streamlined teams by providing a platform that they can just use as a service. Yeah? So there can be technical platforms like CI/CD, cloud platforms, Kubernetes, all that stuff, but also business platforms. Think about sending and receiving written letters, other things. Yeah? For instance, a core banking system in a bank can, for instance, be seen as a platform. Yeah? And then we have the enabling team. And that's an interesting thing here. Yeah, so they work along the streamlined teams and enable them to do certain things in a better fashion. Yeah, so they enable them, for instance, to do security work. At many customers, I've, for instance, seen security teams with a disabling attitude. What? You want to do that? Are you crazy? That's forbidden. Yeah? No, that's not secure. No, that's against the policies. And like the major job, I'm exaggerating a bit so that we can have a bit of a laugh here. Yeah. So I see a high degree of a disabling mentality. The enabling mentality would be, hey, let's understand what you need, and we help you to build security right in that. After our support, you can do a lot of that heavy lifting on your own, dear Streamline teams. Yeah. So we empower you, we help you. And I think this is, in this transformation, an interesting idea, what we could do with the architecture team. Yeah? So think about an architecture enabling team that we establish. I mean, in this centralized architecture team, there is a lot of knowledge about architectures, about technologies, about platforms, about the organization itself. Yeah? It would be utterly stupid to say, well, we don't need that anymore. Yeah? But those folks, they could become enablers. And I would say some key goals could be, on the one hand, that we gradually shift architectural work into the teams, and an optional part, but this is also the very dangerous one, yeah, is that maybe in the future we don't need that enabling anymore because the Streamline teams know how to do the architectural work on their own. If you come with that target to the architecture team, be prepared for a lot of pushback. Yeah? And I'll address that later on. I'm not promoting firing anyone here. Yeah? That's not what I want to do here. But that there is another shift in roles. Yeah? And the tasks and the way that this team should work is, for instance, with pair programming, working in mobs, architecture as facilitation. I can't wait for Andrew's book on that topic, for instance. Yeah, moderating. Yeah, for instance, micro and macro architecture decisions, challenging design ideas from the Streamline team, yeah, from an experienced architecture perspective, educating people on patterns, technologies, resilience, stuff like that. Also, standardization. Hey, there's a good idea to standardize certain things. Yeah, I mean, autonomous team doesn't imply that everyone does stuff on their own how they please. Yeah, that's not meant by that. Yeah? Sometimes standardization is a good idea because it reduces cognitive load. That's a problem that you don't need to think about. Yeah, we standardize that, everyone follows the standard, good. And finally, also, and that's a very important thing, especially in the first phases, that this team acts as a protector, yeah, for the Streamline teams that are getting started with that work, yeah, against politics, dynamics outside, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I think, especially in the first phases when we try to adopt that, that's super important. So architecture enablers need to be coaches, mentors, sparring partners, and not an hierarchical instance. The boss loves that. The other teams say, that's exactly what we need. That's great. It's a good idea. But what about the architecture team? Think about them. So how about my career? How to do that? Do we lose power? Aren't we the specialists? That's not part of my job description. Yeah, so you will increase a lot of uncertainty there. Yeah, so I think we need to go along a path, yeah, a step-by-step approach here. And I think the first step that you have to take here is to enable the enablers. Yeah, that's, I think, a first thing. Yeah, because the ivory tower has never done any enabling. They said, Eduardo, you need to do it my way. Javiera, you as well. If not, I will escalate against you. And I can escalate against you. I would never do that with you folks. Yeah? But this needs to be enabled. Yeah? And when do that? Yeah? Good ideas could be working with mobs, with experienced coaches. Yeah? Dedicated training courses and personal development plans. Yeah? Allow those folks to fail. They will fail. They will make mistakes. Yeah? There will be a lot of falling back into certain behaviors. Yeah? And take their concerns seriously. Yeah? a good idea for that would be, for instance, to bring in a new stakeholder into that journey. And that's something that I do right now at every single customer where I'm doing that stuff. I suggest the management to early on bring in personal development department in order to address these things very, very early on. And their task is to establish, for instance, training curriculums, coaching offers, work with the architects and the developers together. And they should have an eye on the overall transformation. So there are some really seasoned folks in some of those departments that can go a long way to help you. And they love it when you proactively bring them in. And early, and not when things have fallen apart. Now, I want to emphasize this here. The architecture team needs a protection boundary at the beginning of psychological safety, with transparency on future career paths, with trainings, with coaching, and so on. After that, we should go the first small steps. We get started now, and this first step, I wouldn't run that in a waterfall kind of way. That's the first thing you should keep in mind. Let's address that. And in parallel, why we do the coaching and so on, we take the first small steps in terms of the architecture enabling. So we get started. But it should be very, very clear that the management has the back of this architecture team. So we support you. We know everyone needs to learn here. And we support you on your journey going forward. And the same applies also to the streamline teams when you switch to that. Very often, they need not just architecture enabling, but also, for instance, technological enabling. And so at an insurance company, for instance, had a case where they did a transformation where the idea was, okay, so far we've been writing code in COBOL on the mainframe in a very structured way. There were templates for everything. There was a template for database access, there was a template for that, a template for that, and everyone was super comfortable in there. Now, with a switch, so then they said, okay, we want to build Java-based microservices on Kubernetes for the cloud in an agile cross-functional fashion, and you're responsible. Boom. You need a lot of enabling for that. And I said, okay, that's a transformation that will probably take 10 years for you folks. That takes time. And it needs a lot of support from the management. The goal here is to gain experience, to do stuff, to succeed, to fail, to learn, to do stuff, fail again. And suddenly the Workers' Council appears. Hey, we have a few questions to you folks. What are you doing here? Well, we're doing great things. We're improving people's work. We add more autonomy and freedom, and that's a good thing. Isn't that a great idea? And also, we increase cross-silo collaboration. We decrease the amount of orders from one team to another. Isn't that a great place to work? Well, this isn't that easy. We oppose this idea. And the reason for that is the current salary system. Why? Let's take a look at the salary bands that are in place in the organization. We brought them with us. That's what the Worker Council said. Let's take a look at that salary band for the software architects. So on the first level, you design architectures that are being reviewed by others. So you start as a software architect, as a young person. You need to earn respect from others, gain experience, and so on. You earn, let's say, 60 to 80K a year, and that's what you do. That's what's required from you. You take no responsibility. On the second level, so when you get promoted, salary-wise, maybe that's also an internal career step, so your job title stays the same. You're a software architect, but in the salary system, you're on the next level. You earn a few more bucks. There is one thing, you give architectural instructions to other teams, and you are responsible for that. You take responsibility for them. On the third level, you lead teams of architects. You're responsible for the overall architecture. Take a look at level 2. Gives architectural instructions to other teams. So Worker Council says, well, the current state prevents architects from progressing in the salary or career system. That's a showstopper. Yeah? Of course, you could laugh about that, but I have seen that at least 2 customers where that happens. I even had one customer where this also was in place on the business side. And I see Alberto sitting there. We had a good laugh about that 2 weeks ago at the Como camp in Vienna, where it was in the salary band of the business people. You have to give developers requirements. You need to tell developers what to do. And that was a huge deal breaker for any event storming session because the business just opposed that. We're not doing that. We're killing our promotions. And it may sound ridiculous at first, but that's a super valid point. Yeah? And they are absolutely, I totally get why this opposition is in place. And this needs to be addressed. And so, for instance, that also affects domain experts in the context of collaborative modeling. You need to bring in HR as a next stakeholder. You need to sit down together with HR. So at one customer, we solved it by bringing in from the management HR and say, we need a change to that. And this stuff changes extremely slowly. Yeah? So an open end, a quick fix, and that's what was established at one customer, was that we added an addendum. Gives instructions to others or enables/collaborates with others. Yeah? So we added the or to that. So, okay, this is easy. Yeah, everything stays the same. We just open some more options to that. But as an advisor to the management, I would say that the expectation is that we don't need the or in 7 to 10 years, maybe 5 years as a challenge. Yeah? So HR is responsible for contracts, salaries, legal stuff. And in step 3, we work as an enabling team. So we addressed this hurdle. We did that. We started working as an enabling team, and now it's time that folks are in charge. Yeah? We removed this protection boundary. Yeah? Now they are in charge. Yeah? And sooner or later, maybe the development team will say, well, we're pretty good at architecture now. It's not longer a burden on our cognitive load. We're pretty good to go. We're super happy. Now what are you going to do now? As a next step, an option could be to dissolve and merge. Yeah? That means that we stop having that enabling team. For me personally, I think enabling teams don't need to stay forever. Yeah? There are certain parts where that makes sense. Of course, they should be long-lived. Yeah? I don't believe in 1 year or half a year enabling teams. Yeah? They should be long-lived, and I think that this transition takes a couple of years. Yeah? So if there is no longer need for a certain enabling, we shouldn't do that. On the other hand, we could keep it so that they switch to research, R&D tasks, and find out what are newest architectural trends, that we remove this cognitive load of the R&D stuff from the development teams, and that we bring in, hey, there's this idea, there's that idea, we could help you, for instance, now with a transition to serverless architectures, event-driven architectures, whatever may come up, or adoption of AI in architectures, whatever, but another part, if you say, okay, we don't need that, don't fire those folks. They're super valuable in the streamline teams or for establishing platforms, in the process of the future. So let's summarize the stakeholders that you need to have in your head before going on that task. Of course, the developers in the streamline teams. we move the architectural work to their team. We need to create an environment of psychological safety in terms of decision-making and owning things. Yeah? Always keep in mind their cognitive load. Yeah? If this is out of touch or out of bounds, you will start to struggle. The architects, yeah, they also need an area of psychological safety in terms of job security. And for them, yeah, it's also a very, very big change. Yeah? They need to be enabled as well. Yeah? They move from instructing to coaching. Senior management, super important. Without senior management support, this doesn't fly. Yeah? You can't do that bottom up. Yeah? I like working in a mixture of top-down, bottom-up in those cases. Yeah? So that we set and manage expectations, readjust career paths, and they must be the leaders of that cultural change. Personal development can help you with coaching, training courses. Could have an eye on the overall transformation. I've seen that working nicely at one customer. HR is there for the salary bands, career paths, yeah? Updating contracts, job descriptions, and so on. Yeah? I think that's also, for instance, in the DevOps area, a very big hurdle, yeah? When it comes to call service on weekends and so on. Yeah? And never forget the Workers' Council. Yeah? They are very important for the psychological safety of the employees. Yeah? They are there to protect them. They must be on board. If you have a strong Workers' Council, they can create very hard blockers. Yeah? And they very often have also good reasons to do that. Yeah? So bring them in early. After I had a similar presentation at the Agile Meets Architecture conference in Berlin last year, I was proactively hit up by a person from a Workers' Council who was at the conference. And they said, we're super interested in that. Yeah, it's sad that we don't get that people fear us. Yeah, so come up to us. We have ideas. Yeah, we actually like that way of working. Yeah, bring us in. Let's work together. Let's collaborate on that. Yeah, of course, certain companies are different. Yeah, it depends on political dynamics that you have in companies, but those folks are not your enemy. Yeah. Now, I didn't mention one person so far. And the person that I didn't mention is the outside world. What's with this person? Maybe, just maybe, a little bit of an outlook, a glimpse of an idea. This isn't just about an architectural transformation. That's a huge transformation. There's a lot of stuff going on. And maybe, just maybe, you could think about a management enabling team as well. That gives the management a sense of security. I see, especially in Germany, many managers who are really afraid of agile stuff. Where are we in this place is a question that I get asked again and again and again from German managers, for instance. Yeah? So where's our place in that? Yeah? So maybe that could also be an idea. Yeah? So how to act with cross-functional teams, how to deal with team autonomy. Yeah? And yeah, that's it from my side. I thank you for listening. We have time for a bunch of questions. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn if you want. And I'll be around at the conference for another 1 to 2 hours. After that, I need to leave for my hometown, Nuremberg. So are there any questions here? No questions. Then I say, thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.